Thank you, Crochet Society, for sponsoring this video.
Believe it or not, making the decision to try Tunisian crochet is harder than the 3 Tunisian crochet stitches I'm about to show you. No, really, if you already know how to crochet, learning Tunisian crochet is as easy as learning a new stitch. So let's squash any confusion you have about the supplies and get to the fun stuff. First things first, grab some medium weight yarn. Anything you have will do just fine. That leads us to the big question. What hook do you need right now to try these stitches? Your regular crochet hooks won't really work, especially hooks with grippy handles like this. Remember, all the stitches will need to fit on the hook at once, so unless you're making a 2-inch project, these won't work. Technically, you can use this type of hook, but I don't really recommend it. There isn't a stopper at the end, so your stitches may very likely fall off the back. Plus, you're still limited with how big your little experimental project can be. This is what I would recommend. A hook like this is perfectly fine for stitch swatches, and you'll be able to use it for projects up to that size. It's always best to use a bigger hook than normal for Tunisian crochet, so it'll make the curling edges less of an issue. You can usually find a Tunisian crochet hook, also called an Afghan hook, at Joann's, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, whatever you have close to you. I bet they'll have something. Another option is Amazon. I actually picked up this entire set for super cheap several years ago, like less than 10 bucks. I'll put a link in the description if you want to have a look at them. It'll probably be a better value than buying a single hook at a craft store, but do what works best for you. Every basic Tunisian crochet stitch starts off with the same foundation, so go ahead and make your slip knot and any number of chains. Let's go with 30. Now flip it over, find the second bump there, and insert your hook there. Yarn over and pull up a loop. This feels like a single crochet, right? Only leave it there and keep going, collecting loops on your hook as you go. This is why it's important to have a hook that's at least as long as the width of your project. When you run out of chains, yarn over and pull through 1 loop. All right, now yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Then yarn over and pull through 2 loops again, and keep going until you run out of loops. Well, you'll have 1 left. So this is the foundation for any Tunisian crochet stitch. From here, you could go on to work any of the 3 stitches we'll cover, or any other stitch for that fact. That's the first big takeaway here. The next big takeaway is how it took 2 passes to make this happen. Forward, collecting loops on the hook, and return, working them off. This is another quality that all Tunisian crochet stitches have. Now, Tunisian crochet stitches have multiples, just like any other stitch you've ever crocheted. Another thing to keep in mind as you move on to projects later. All the stitches you'll try today, like a solid row of single crochet or double crochet, they don't have a specific multiple, so any number works. The first stitch we'll learn is the most basic of the Tunisian stitches, but don't let that sway your opinion of it. It's kind of like what the stockinette stitch is for knitting. It's what comes to mind when you think of Tunisian crochet. It's called the simple stitch. So with your foundation in hand, notice that there's a vertical bar on the front and the back. Slide your hook between the 2, yarn over and pull up a loop. Then do the same thing for the next vertical bar. And to the end of the row, collecting loops on your hook as you go. When you come to the last stitch of the row, for any stitch, it needs to be worked exactly like this. This will make sure the side stays nice and even, just locate that little chain and make sure your hook goes through 2 of the 3 loops. Remember how you worked that return pass on the foundation? You'll do the same thing here. Yarn over and pull through 1 loop, then yarn over and pull through 2 loops over and over until only 1 remains. For nearly all Tunisian crochet stitches, you'll work this exact same return pass, so you can just go ahead and commit that one to memory. On this second row, we have another foundation, if you will, on top of the simple stitch row like we just made. And just like before, we'll slide the hook through, yarn over and pull up a loop and keep going. Then work the same return pass. That's really all there is to the simple stitch. It'll make a nice dense fabric that's slightly stretchy, perfect for blankets, pillows, scarves, clothing. I mean, honestly, you name it. One more thing to note, it looks different on the back than it does the front.
Now before we get to the next stitch, let's talk a little bit about our sponsor, Crochet Society. You're here because you absolutely love crochet, so why not treat yourself this month with a box of crochet goodies? Crochet Society makes that incredibly easy. Check out their past box shop to handpick the box that speaks to you. Each one comes with a unique crochet hook and stitch marker, a variety of crochet goodies depending on the box you choose, 3 exclusive crochet patterns, and the supplies to complete one of them. They're written in UK terminology, and they're organized in a mini magazine, complete with other interesting crochet things to read about. Now don't worry if you can't read patterns either. Each one includes a beginner-friendly tutorial by our YouTube friend, Bella Coco. And if you're thinking, Brittany, I don't know UK terms. You teach in US terms. Well, don't worry. There's a little conversion chart on the back page of the mini magazine. Past boxes are half price right now too, which is an incredible deal for everything you get. And shipping is included too. Past boxes have a limited quantity, and once they're gone, they're gone. So head over to the link in the description and grab one of these boxes. I really don't think you'll regret it. Thank you again, Crochet Society, for sponsoring this video, and an even bigger thanks to you if you decide to snatch up one of these boxes through my link below. That's a huge support to the channel.
Now let's look at the next stitch, shall we? This one is a real favorite of mine because long before I knew how to knit, I was creating knit-like fabrics with this stitch. Appropriately, it's called the Tunisian knit stitch. Alright, so we have the same foundation as before, and remember, when we worked that simple stitch, we put the hook through the 2 bars, but it stayed on this side of the work, right? So for the Tunisian knit stitch, go through the 2 bars, but let it poke through to the back. Then yarn over and pull up a loop as usual and keep going. And that's all there is to the Tunisian knit stitch. It'll also make a dense, kind of stretchy fabric, also not reversible, but still useful for all sorts of projects. So if there's only one thing that sinks in, let it be this. Tunisian crochet is very much like regular crochet or knitting even. There isn't one Tunisian stitch, there are many. And just like everything you're already used to, the placement of the hook determines the stitch. So let's look at one more Tunisian crochet stitch, the full stitch, and that's F-U-L-L, not F-O-O-L. Starting with the same foundation, for this stitch, instead of working in those vertical bars, you'll work in the space between them. So put your hook straight through to the back, yarn over, and pull up a loop. Then insert it into the next space, yarn over, and pull up a loop, all the way to the end of the row. Since you worked the hook in the first space at the beginning of this row, you need to skip the last space, this row, so you don't increase your stitch count. Then work your same return pass. The second row of this one is a little different than the first because the spaces aren't situated directly on top of one another from row to row. So rather than start off with this space, like before, start here instead. And at the end of the row, work in the last space, and then the side stitch here. And of course, work your return pass. Alternate how you worked each of the last 2 rows for the length of your project, and to help you keep it all straight, just count the stitches on your forward pass so you don't increase or decrease. The full stitch really is a wonderful stitch that makes a squishy fabric with excellent drape, depending on the hook size and the yarn choice, of course. It's one of my favorite stitches for a blanket. So now the question becomes, what do you do at the end of the project? You can't leave it in this phase, obviously, because you still have a bunch of loops on the hook, and you can't really leave it like this either, because the foundation looks completely different than the stitch pattern. So you have to work a bind off row. No matter which of these 3 stitches you're working on, place the hook as you would for the forward pass, only instead of collecting the loops, you'll pull the new loop through the last. Like everything else, a little practice goes a long way. As you're working up little test swatches to practice these stitches, you may notice some curling down at the bottom edge. Don't worry, you're not doing anything wrong. Curling at the bottom is completely normal for Tunisian crochet and is the result of not flipping the work as you go. There are some things you can do to minimize the curl though. Check out this video next for some tips. Happy hooking, and I'll see you in the next one.